Hello, my name is Mark Hauser, the Ecology Outreach Manager with Friends of the Chicago River. I'd like to welcome you to Creating a Litter-Free Chicago Calumet River System. This workshop is proudly presented by the Center for Great Lakes Literacy and by Friends of the Chicago River. It is focused on the issue of litter in our river from a teacher's perspective, teaching a litter-free curriculum, leading a litter-free service learning project, including Workdays, and collecting litter-free data for academic research and for classroom lessons. Friends of the Chicago River is a member of the Litter-Free Chicago and Calumet River Task Force. This extraordinary partnership also includes the Mars Wrigley Foundation, the Shedd Aquarium, Loyola University Chicago, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, REI, and Waste Management. Our featured presenter for this video is Ms. Sharon Waller. Sharon is the president of the River Park Advisory Council and will be talking about leading a litter-free service learning project, including Workdays.
We newly formed River Park Advisory Council during the pandemic. We did have Friends of River Park before that, which was just kind of trying to create an alliance with the park advisory, with the park manager, who at that time was not so favorable towards forming an advisory council, but with community support, we managed to form during the pandemic and just started up activities in January. So as part of River Park Friends, we previously did cleanups, and this was how we forged a friendship with the park manager. So we had maybe 2 years under our belt functioning as like site captains with Friends of the Chicago River for the River Day that happens in May. And then when we did we also partnered with other organizations. So the Parks Foundation and Friends of the Park. So that gave us 3 partners to pull off 3 good, well-attended cleanup events. And in moving forward, we wanted to kind of try to do that monthly. So, but the question is always how much can we pull off on our own versus partnerships. So definitely having partnerships. So you might have an idea of who is already involved in cleanups in your neighborhood. So the Forest Preserve might have a stewardship program. So our partners, I did submit a, let me put some information in the chat. So in the workshop folder, there is a comment. Let's see, how can I share? I'm going to put in the chat the write-up that I put together, which is basically our go-to guide for planning a River Day. And then I threw together some slides, basically after I saw all the beautiful slides of the previous presenters. I didn't want to look, like I was a slacker. So let's see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Oh, you might have to give me host privileges, Mark. Or I can just put the link in the chat. Mark, if you want to pull this one up, I'm putting it in the chat, which is basically just some photos to go along with the handout. So what I'm going to do is try to give you like a how to create a cleanup day. And the good thing is that you're teachers, so you have kind of a captive audience of super motivated, highly efficient cleaner-uppers. So randomly with the pandemic the way it is, I got my emergency teaching license and I've been in the classroom last year and this year for 3 weeks trying to get schools open when they didn't have teachers. So I've been in the classroom with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science. So I know how hard your job is, is the moral of that story. But then also having a partnership and trying to lure out the local high schools has really been a winner for us. So as a specific story, I'd like to tell you about our July 5th cleanup. So I mentioned that we had always cleaned up in partnership with other organizations, the big three being Friends of the Chicago River, Friends of the Park, and the Chicago Parks Foundation. July 5th was new for us because the park manager wanted a cleanup event before the kids came back for summer camp the next day, and the place was a mess. So I'm not sure, it looks like my photos are not, oh, it's just really slowly loading. I see.
Yeah. It's still working on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you'll see the photos eventually. So I'll just tell you the story. So the place was just a mess. Like, it was dangerous to walk over there on the 4th of July because it was the Wild West of fireworks. And we straddled the river with an east portion containing River Park and the field house, but then there's also a west portion, which is called River Park West, which also contains the track and field that is shared with North Park University. And that's where the bulk of the fireworks were going off of. And here's a picture that's loading right now. You can see they just totally demolished the field. So there were burn marks, big crevasse, and you can see all the stuff that was cleaned up that we drug over to the bleachers. So I wasn't sure who was going to show up because there was no established cleanup event by our bigger, more organized citywide partners. So I was very kind of nervous, and I put this out on all channels. We went to the 2 ward that predominantly cover the park area, Ward 33 and 40 promoted the event in their newsletters, and I followed up with them just to make sure it was posted, and they're like, yes, it's in our newsletter. And then additionally, the big win was somebody at Von Steuben High School, the principal, I believe, saw that in the Ward 33 newsletter and sent it out to their sports teams and their soccer team. And well, actually, there's only one kid from the soccer team, and then also the cross country team coaches. So MVP Coach Lori brought her entire team to clean up that day in place of their regular scheduled practice, which would have been conducted at the track that was part of our cleanup. So these kids were amazing because they not only came with smiles on their faces and good cheer, they watched other teams, including Mather, and I shouldn't even say that, other teams that shall remain nameless, run their regular practices by running over the trash. So they would jump over it and run around it while the Von Steuben kids actually were there to pick it up. And I also put in this flyer kind of an example of the media blurb that was sent out. So this was the email that was sent out on page 2 of my handout. Kind of like the who, what, when, where, why, and how of what we're trying to do. So we created, just to make it fun, a bag fill challenge. So whoever was going to fill the most bags, bring your entire organization and do a bag fill challenge. And the winner will receive a lavish box of munchkins and heaps of praise. And then, of course, we had to follow up with as much publicity as we could find. And so with that mention, I'm also officially lobbying Mark here to try to find an award for these kids because I actually have a daughter on cross country. So I just saw Coach Lori last week and I thanked her again. But really to be able to connect with the high school kids that maybe have schools neighboring the parks, which River Park has a bunch of high schools in our area that could participate. That really is the way to go. These kids worked hard, and I don't even think they knew they were working hard. They just managed to make such a huge impact, and we were only cleaning up for 2 hours. So as part of that, there is a picture on the next slide, Mark, if you wanted to advance. We have our whole group. So our whole group included people from River Park Advisory Council, which I have a newsletter that I send out. And then of course, the Von Steubens came through us through the Ward 33 newsletter. And then I also put something out on a, I forget what app they use, but it's the Sierra Club Water Team. They have an app that I put that out for. So we got a couple people from there. But really the Von Steuben kids were like more than half of our cleanup crew. And in the foreground, you can see like a box of munchkins that I brought just to have ready for sustenance going out to start the work. And then there's, if you want to cursor again to the next slide, slide 4. There's the prize box of the lavish box of munchkins. So you can see they're not doing it for the glory or the money, but you can see them smiling too, which was great. So if you want to think back as to what the pandemic was looking like in July, we were cleaning up with masks. It was, definitely fine to be outside, but just these kids had been virtual all last year. So cleaning up in the park was, I'm sure, fun to get back together. They hadn't actually gotten back to school in person yet. So maybe that was a draw also. In the next slide, you can see the obligatory trash photos. So the one thing that I would have done differently, because we were not working with a bigger organization, and I didn't have an RSVP as to how many people were coming, we started at the field house and we radiated out. Whereas if you know how many people you're going to have, I think it's better to assign groups like a certain area. Like if I had known ahead how many, I would have just assigned all of Von Steuben to the track because they are most engaged in the track. That's where they practice. And then maybe I would have gone over there also if I hadn't had to, man the sign up post to talk to the other coaches at the other 2 high schools that were just running around the trash and try to encourage them to maybe take a break and help out these, champion students. There's usually some kind of challenge as to who can bring back the weirdest thing. So here, this grill is actually not something that we're using. That's one of the items that was found. There were also trash cans that were completely blown up and melted. And there was another one of these grills, I think, tied up in a tree, which I think is standardly happening now. It's just a pandemic thing. But these kind of trash photos, they're not only helpful for the thank you emails that you send out afterwards and maybe sending out newsletters to the Ward 40 and Ward 33 newsletter, but I also use these photos to advertise for the next event. So next year when we're starting to plan again, this is going to be kind of one of my MVP photos and try to remind everybody how much fun you had. And I have to say these young kids have so much better attitudes because all of my gray-haired neighbors are like, clean up the park, really? Whereas these kids come out and they have fun. So let's make picking up litter sexy again, is my takeaway message. The next slide is partners. So our partners were the Sierra Club Water Team. We pulled a few people from the River Park Advisory Council, local high schools. I have 3 kids, so I could definitely lay on pressure to have some show up from their teams. But it also occurred to me, so like my daughter is one of the captains of the swim team, and she got no traction trying to get people to sign up. It's really through the coaches. And ideally, the way Von Steuben got there was again through the principal seeing it and suggesting to the coaches. So that newsletters and these personal kind of communications with the principals are invaluable. And so if you have any parents that sit or otherwise attend the local school council meetings or the Friends of meetings, that's a great way to try to engage them. And I think it's kind of crazy that these schools, other than Von Steuben, because hail to them, but these schools use the general open lands for their practice at no cost. And so to ask them to be engaged enough to maintain the property seems small to me. But of course, you have to find out some way to frame that in a really positive, super thankful way instead of laying on the guilt. And again, we advertised, pardon my misspelling because I did this slide in like 5 seconds, advertised in the ward newsletters. So then so you can stop sharing that one, Mark, thanks. So back to the the handout that I prepared. So again, just really tried to talk up what a great job they did. We far exceeded what I thought we could do in 2 hours. The winner of the Bag-Filled Challenge goes to Von Steuben teams who skipped their regular practice. And that is the big take-home story, to clean up and take home the lavish box of munchkins and heaps of praise. And then additionally, I asked the students what they would like to see, because we were trying to form a youth advisory council. And the purpose of that is multiple folds. So one is to ask the students what they want. Ultimately, the fundamental goal of the River Park Advisory Council is to put positive energy in the parks, to maybe displace some of the nonsense that's had been going on, and to make it safe for pro-social activities like the student teams. So to try to get them involved in some kind of a youth advisory council remains one of my personal big goals. So in talking to them, I asked them what they wanted to see. And the number one thing that came up was opening the bathrooms at our boathouse, which the boathouse actually sits on the west side of the river, if any of you are familiar with River Park. And it was built in 2015 and then never opened. And super miraculously, we have an amazing Chicago Park District canoe and fishing guide, Matt Renfrey, who listened to our pleas. And by the way, it's amazing how much people listen to you when you form an advisory council. Just having that silly little, like, no one ran against me for president, but now that I am like an elected president, I'm like, oh, can we get the bathrooms open at the boathouse? And they're like, oh, we'll look into that. And all I have to do is like write a letter, and suddenly they take that letter, whoever, I don't even know what the proper channels are, but that letter gets circulated to whoever the decision makers are that I don't know. And so it's like an amazing power of the pen experience. So we actually got the boathouse open. And so the next time I see those Von Steuben kids, I'm going to let them know that their voice was heard, that I specifically wrote a letter and sent it to the Park Advisory Council coordinator. And she sent it to wherever those letters go. And the boathouse bathrooms were opened. So it wasn't a lot. It was probably only a couple days, frankly. There was a nature center opened, and there's fish tanks with native species caught from the river, so bluegills, etc. But now they're having staffing issues, so it's closed again. So things don't all happen at once. But little baby steps forward. And I would say that this is more than a little baby step forward. So just by those youth coming out and expressing their voices, change has happened. So I try to give out a Be the Change That You Want to See award. And so they are one recipient. Matt Renfrey is another recipient for being able to do that. And it's really rewarding to see, things that I think are good for our community happen. And tying this all back to litter, which a youth advisory council would definitely be kind of like a standing resource to mobilize for these river cleanups. So, which gets me to, who are your partners? So if you're going to coordinate a cleanup event, on page 3 of my handout, I just have our big 3 go-tos, and then additionally a 4th, which is the Rohnert Park Stewards, which I believe they are through the Forest Preserve. So in there, I put approximate dates, which are based on the 2020 dates, who the organization is, the event sponsors. So Earth Day is sponsored by Friends of the Park. Chicago, or the River Day, is sponsored by our sponsors for this workshop, Friends of the Chicago River. It's Your Park Day, which is the Chicago Parks Foundation, and then Rohnert Park Steward, which I believe is the Forest Preserve. And then I just have this table that I just go to every year. So we meet to kind of plan events in March. Maybe it's better to even go a little earlier, like end of February, because this April cleanup comes up fast. But this year it was crazy with the pandemic. So it was kind of, when I checked in March, it was still postponed, and then it wound up being ago, kind of after I had checked. So we missed that one, but any kind of cleanup is good. Then also I have this other resource here, which is Kilbourne Park, which has a plant sale. So our park manager let us know that they had some extra plants. So I think it's like Mother's Day weekend. They usually have their plant sale, and anything that's left over can just be picked up for free. So I've been trying to start a community garden, because in years past, when we had like the Key Club of Northside College Prep come, I gave them shovels and they planted a community garden. It's not as easy as that sounds, because the maintaining it was challenging. And then you also have to coordinate with park maintenance projects. So currently the field house has fencing and big construction cranes all around it while they redo their roof. But nonetheless, that's the kind of things you can do. And then if you have a monthly kind of project, then that could be something that becomes a little bit more maintainable. And then also Kilbourne Park gave me some advice, like go for small produce, because if you have like, a big squash plant where somebody comes and takes one, then your whole plant is done. So like cherry tomatoes are good. Pollinator gardens planted in addition has turned out to be way much more maintainable. But, if you throw a few herbs like basil's good, sage grows almost like a weed, then you can kind of claim your, a little bit of a community garden too. So that's probably more, you guys are talking about litter, but sometimes you just have to get a little creative to keep people actively engaged. So if you have, I think litter is a great primary focus. And then if you have a day where you have a lot of other people showing up, then you can start doing these kind of other satellite projects. So such as with the pandemic, the park manager wanted to clean out the swimming pool. We have a beautiful Olympic-sized swimming pool. I don't even know how this happened from liability standpoints, but she did select a couple students to actually go into the empty swimming pool to kind of rake out all those leaves that had accumulated over the winter. That was her idea, not mine. So, it all worked out well. So to kind of give you an idea of the basics, I've come up with kind of like a few categories. So planning, promotion, the day of the event work plan, and the thank you plan. So the thank you plan is super important, and it's like the one that's, most likely to get dropped by the wayside, because, you've been there all day and you're tired. But if you can assign somebody to be the photographer to get that obligatory trash photo, that's helpful. So also tools and supplies. So going back up to the top, so planning. So no event is too small. We started our first cleanup events with the Friends of River Park with just maybe like 4 or 5 neighbors, and we brought our own tools, and we just, did what we could. We started around the field house, which is the most important area where the kids play, with the aftercare program, and just radiated out from there. And then also the corners of the park, doing some kind of beautification garden, planting sunflowers or something like that, something that can handle our natural rainfall without a lot of maintenance is good. So zinnias have turned out to be something that grows without too much help. So don't worry about being too small. Definitely partner when you can, and especially any group that uses Eventbrite is helpful, because you can do an online waiver then, and hopefully that's something that sticks around after the pandemic, because that was super helpful. Work with your park manager and get their wish list, and I think it's kind of important to make it clear that everything goes to the glory of the park manager. So that was a lesson that I had to learn, to make sure that it's not looking like the River Park Advisory Council is coming in and saving the day. It's really more about, we support the park manager. Request tools at least a month ahead, and it's amazing what kind of tools you can get. So you can get bags, gloves, of course, but you can also ask for wheelbarrows, grabbers, pruners, and kind of bigger items that you could use for planting a garden if that was on your agenda. Invasive species control needs branch cutters if you're going to be focusing on buckthorn. Promotion is super important. So not only that, it feels like, a press release where you have to like send out your press release and then follow up and make sure it got published. But anything online, if you have an online newsletter, I think it's going to be way easier for you folks who are teachers with the captive audiences. And then also you can offer volunteer hours. A lot of your schools, right? Maybe it used to be a thing where volunteer hours were required for graduation, but I know I have a daughter who's doing the congressional award and she has some insane number of volunteer hours that she has to do. So this is a great way to lure kids out. So the high school teams I found to be self-organizing and hard workers. It's just a matter of how to get to them. So, oops, I don't know what that is. Oh, I lost my, here we are. Sorry, somehow something else popped up. So the day of, as I mentioned, your plan of how to handle litter pickup should really kind of be dictated by who you know is going to show up. If you have groups, then you can kind of make a challenge from group to group to see who can clean up the most. Bag fill is kind of the easiest way to do it. If you want to get into the science of it and do sorting or a weight, then that's up to you. That's harder. And so I did not go that way just because of resources. So we just did flat out volume and number of bags. And we also started on July 5th by radiating out. Now, there was one kind of negative comment, like they felt like that wasn't that organized, but I don't know what I would have done differently without knowing the exact numbers of people that were showing up. And then my standard comment when somebody has, feedback like that is, I really need good people like you who can identify the problem to come and help, right? So I'm not Superwoman, but these good suggestions are awesome to hear beforehand. So I don't know. We'll see if that works. You can let me know whether that works for you or not. So no litter is too small. You guys have talked about the microplastics. I for sure have spent 2 solid hours picking up plastic water bottle caps over at the park or at the track on the west side of the river, because there's a lot of soccer games from the community that play over there, and they bring on like full-on vending and everything else. And I don't understand why people just open up bottles and just throw the cap in the dirt, but that is a thing. And so there's like 20 years of bottle caps in this one spot, and you have to dig them out. And I could spend days over there just digging these stupid plastic bottle caps out, but nothing is too small. It also doesn't help me out on the bag fill challenge. I'm never going to win a bag fill challenge that way, but that's okay. I want other people to win. So in general, if you know who you've got coming, go to the farthest area first and fill that bag up on the way home, just so you don't have your volunteers lugging heavy bags. And at the dumpster with the obligatory dumpster and bag photo. If you can't do that, as we can't do that, River Park is just too big. The River Ronan and Legion Park system goes from Peterson to Lawrence. So we really had to have centralized areas to drop trash along dumpsters and along the garbage cans. But then there's a central dumpster by the field house. So I went back after everybody left and I took photos all up and down from Ronan to Legion, and then use those to post on our Facebook page, our public Facebook page, and send out any other kind of channels that we had. Friendly competition turned out to be fun. I'd highly recommend it. And then also, as I mentioned, assign a photographer and somebody to follow up with a thank you plan. Goodies go a long way. I just bought the munchkins myself. They're really not, that expensive. And also it was nice because the place that I bought them from is nearby and they support our local schools with fundraisers and stuff like that. So they're kind of my go-to, just try to always give back to those that give to us. The post cleanup activities on my wish list as we grow, I want to start having like live music at the end of the cleanup events, or a picnic or a party or something else that's small. And then just kind of continue to grow to make it a fun event. And then plan ahead for your social media, your hashtags. I think if you go back up to the example of the thank you, I came up with a bunch of hashtags, and I borrowed these from the Friends of the Chicago River. Their hashtags are Summer Challenge, and then ours that I added. Oh, and then lose the litter is also one of their hashtags that they used for River Day. And then we added River Pack, which is the Park Advisory Council, Litter Warriors, Park Stewards, I think is from the Forest Preserve. And then my little thing, because this is a thing for me now, 5 pieces of litter to earn my dinner. So every time I go for a walk, I just try to pick up 5 pieces. So that's what I'm kind of pushing with my neighbors now, because if we all just do a little bit every day, and this is no glory, because it's not going to be like a photo in somebody's newsletter reported to the hotspots of the Friends of the Chicago River database. 5 is not glamorous, just 5 pieces, but it makes a difference, totally makes a difference. So with that, I have talked your ear off, I'm sure, and I will pass back to Mark and on to the next portion of the program. Thank you.